night. So
Okay. All right. So there's a lot going on right now about. Ooh, I like that. I've got one of these not $100 cuppy things. Try to get it in the right. This was
this
not
is my Christmas present.
$100. This was expensive enough, but oh my goodness. Anyway, there's a lot going out right now about the Cabbage Patch Kids. And when you were about Dot's age for your birthday, I bought you. I didn't rate Cabbage Patch Babies. I didn't rate that. I never got one. Yeah, there's probably several reasons for that. But
yeah, I can remember opening it. It was in like bright yellow wrapping paper, and I remember opening it. And I
had made you a dress to match hers. I made a dress for her, and I made a dress for you to match. Had this little matching outfit thing. And I think I had you put on the dress before you opened the present.
I don't remember the dress, but I remember I loved her. She looked like me. She had the brown hair. I think she had the blue eyes.
Blue eyes.
And her name was Cassie. I remember that.
I think you named her. I don't think I named her. Or was she already named?
I think she was already named off of the certificate that came with her. Yeah. Yep. So, and I absolutely loved her. And I wish I still had her because I know Whitney would love her.
And then there's this mom fail. Okay. There's this mom fail. Okay. Yeah. You know, homeschool moms in the 80s were scared to death that our children were going to get taken away from us. So everything had to be perfect. It was the pre-Pinterest perfection thing. So our children had to be dressed good. They had to look nice. Their hair had to look nice. Our houses had to look nice just in case DHS if somebody decided to call DHS on us, there was no reason to come in and take our children away. So there was that. And there was, and then there was we were afraid that Hollywood and things were going to drag our children to the pit of hell. So there was a lot of information going around on cassette tapes that we would copy and share with each other and pass along and things like that. And articles in some of the homeschool magazines and things like that. And it had come around.
The first wave homeschoolers did... Well, I'm going to try and put this as kindly as possible. So first wave homeschoolers did not know what was going on. They were first wave. They were doing the best they could with what they had at the time. And, you know, we have seen a lot of people coming out of that first wave homeschooling that are admitting to different forms of abuse and stuff like that. And yeah, a lot of it was fear driven, that these parents, these first wave homeschool parents, were afraid of their kids getting taken away. Were afraid that that the world around them was going to send their kids to hell, and ended up so many of them pushing their kids away.
Overdid it. Totally overdid it. And you get in the middle of that. And I think me coming in young, because your dad and I get married in 1990. We had you in 91. I had no clue.
Oh, we're married in July and I was born in August.
Of the next year. Your dad. Oh my goodness. Anyway, yeah, I had never even heard of homeschooling, had no idea that was a thing. So we decided, God called for us to homeschool. We decided to homeschool. I had no clue what I was doing. I really had no clue what I was doing as a mom. My mother was more of, she was the cool mom. She was the buddy. She was She was my drinking buddy in my teens. I mean, my mom wasn't a mom, the way so many other people.
You weren't raised by parents.
No, and a majority of Gen X wasn't.
Right. A majority of Gen X was not.
Yeah, we've got to remember that the first homeschoolers weren't Gen X. They were the very end of the boomers.
Yeah.
Gen X were, basically raised ourselves. And at varying degrees of that, depending on, situations and stuff. We got, slapped, we got beaten, we got left to our own devices. A lot of that. And that was the generation at the time. Moms were working, and it was the first generation of both parents away from home and, type of thing. So I came in at the tail end of the first set of homeschoolers. And so that they were my mentors. And I got some good things from that. And then I got some not so good things. And then I got a little bit of a balance from hippie mom. So a lot of the parents didn't want to talk to their children about sex education, like at all. They didn't want to talk about sex at all. Came back and really bit some families in the rear. I had a hippie mom background, so I had, and then we live on the farm. So, your little brother was running around with,
calf fries, uncooked.
Calf fries, fresh, uncooked calf fries, saying, "Oh, look, seed sacks," because I explained to him that's where the seeds are at. So, yeah, you guys had up close and personal. We bred animals. You guys knew things. But there was information that came through that I'm like, like some of the toys, which I still have a problem with some of these toys today. Trolls toys. I still have a problem with trolls. They're icky. Smurfs. I grew up with Smurfs, but I'm like, oh my goodness, you start learning about Smurfs and it's like, ooh.
Yeah. Whenever you start learning about trolls and Smurfs, there is no good mythology tied to either one of those.
Either one.
Very dark. Smurfs are dead children.
And then Barbie.
And trolls are children thieves. So
Yes, it's bad. It's bad. Bad. So we didn't have those in the house. We didn't do, we never did Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy or anything like that anyway. And that was just our personal preference. Barbie and the bad body image that it would give girls. So I looked for...
I remember those articles. Like, I remember you having me read those articles.
And we would talk about it,
And we would talk about it. I loved my Barbie dolls. I still have my Barbie dolls.
I still played with Barbies when I was 16.
And I never ever looked at a Barbie doll and went, I want to be shaped like this.
Exactly.
The body image, what I've been learning raising my own daughter and being a bonus mom to a teenage daughter that was not raised by me, I've learned that body image is what you teach your children. It is. They learn about body image from you, not from Barbie.
Yeah.
Not from Barbie.
Right.
So if you are letting them, take in social media, like social media influencers, those are real people that are influencing these kids on how they should look, how their lives should look and everything. Back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, it was Cosmopolitan and stuff. That was
and it was the stick skinny. Skinny. And so many people today have eating disorder problems from that stick skinny.
And so many Christians, so many in the homeschool community wanted to blame Barbie for all of these issues. So many people always, any issue.
Not that there aren't some good alternatives. We found some wonderful alternatives for dolls. So, I mean, you don't have to buy a Mattel Barbie doll.
No.
There were the Hearts Club dolls, which Kylie and Leanna just loved. They looked like little girls, and they were just much more But that's not, it's a doll. It's not evil in and of itself.
It's not evil in and of itself. It is a tool. It is a plaything. And it is your job to raise your child on.
Yeah, if you're not going to have Barbies in your house, you need to talk with your children about why you're not going to have Barbies. And they need to understand that decision. But usually we would talk about these things. Like Paul came home with a Barney one time because it was electronic and it said lots of things. Well, I'm just certain that the thing was haunted, and it scared. He got it for Kristen, and it scared her. She did not like it, so we got rid of it. But that was like a mutual decision. This thing is not cool. I didn't like we never watched the show, but I didn't like what it presented and the way it was done. Yeah. And we discussed it. We got rid of it. And but where I failed was the Cabbage Patch, I guess. Yeah. I thought we had talked about it, and maybe you don't remember, or maybe I'm remembering wrong.
I do not remember having a conversation. Usually before we would get rid of something, if there was like an issue with it and this issue was bothering you and Dad,
usually we would
get together, we would talk about it.
It might have been one of those big house cleaning.
I think
that you guys got your room had gotten out of control, and I went through with the trash bag and a bunch of stuff went through.
And I spent like 2 days looking for my Cabbage Patch Cassie doll, and like found one of her dresses, and I could not find her though. And whenever I finally went and talked to you about it, you're like, "Oh, sweetie, I got rid of those." And I was just absolutely devastated because, it was
a favorite doll.
It was a favorite doll.
And I would have loved to have had one whenever I was younger. Like I said, I didn't rate.
One of the things I loved about her was that you could get patterns and make
to make clothes. Yeah, and I had some little patterns for making extra clothes and stuff. Yeah, and I don't remember what the information was that had come out at the time about the Cabbage Patch, but people are digging much deeper into that now. There are postcards that say, "Help us repopulate," and they have babies and cabbages. The first narrative film was a Cabbage Patch film trying to advertise for people to buy these babies. Somebody called her, probably her hubs, seeing what's going on. There was a whole bunch of noise over here. Anyway, the information is why in the late 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, were they feeling like they needed to repopulate? And where were these Cabbage Patch babies coming from? And what was it? I mean, we've kind of been told, well, there were so many teen pregnancies at the time. But there are charts, and I'm taking these with a grain of salt because these are people that have a very evolutionary basis for their science. But there are these charts that show a huge population rise right there at the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. So where did the children from the orphan trains come from? Where did the Cabbage Patch babies and the incubator babies at the World's Fairs, where did all those babies come from? Where did all those children come from? So it's a very interesting discussion that's going on the internet, and I'm not going to go into all of that right now. But
I remember the incubator babies studying that one time, and all of the incubator babies had parents. They had parents that were mostly coming back for them, and the only way they could afford to have their babies incubated, though, is if their babies were on display at like the World Fair and circuses and stuff. So, but all of those babies had like meticulous records with them, because at the time, this guy who was starting up the incubator thing was he was doing
Yeah,
it.
the doctor was, he was like
doing it for
breaking
research.
breaking medical research at the time. Yes. And I mean, that could account all of a sudden you've got some preemies that are living. I know my great granny or my great granny, somewhere in there, one of the Moors, was the midwife actually took her home. Her mother had lost so many preemie babies that her mother took her home. The midwife took her home and stuck her in the oven with the pilot light to keep her warm, and she survived. And I think she was a twin, and the twin didn't make it, but she made it. I just my mother was telling it that she had been told that, so this is coming, down the
like third or fourth hand.
Yeah, it's hard to say what was actually happening, but supposedly she had several litters. Several sets of twins and triplets, and they were premature and they usually died. And she was just so discouraged at that point that she was like, it's just going to die anyway. And she actually survived because the midwife was able to do that. So, yeah. And I mean, I had a preemie, so I'm very, very thankful for incubators. But yeah, you had a lot of they had babies for sale, these Cabbage Patch babies. And they had, the orphan trains. And it was just weird on these postcards that it says, help us repopulate. So it's like, I know that the Civil War was hard, but.
Right. Well, and that's what you see historically. For about as long as we've kept records or wherever records were kept, anytime there was a big, very destructive war, like very shortly thereafter, within a 10-year period, there would be a huge population boom as people just got around and had babies all over the place.
The charts that they are showing don't show that, though. Not like a huge boom. They show this just like exponential boom at this particular time. It's like all the other ones, it's just very, compared to that, it's very, you got your ups and downs, of course, but then that one just shoots almost straight up all of a sudden. So anyway, it's interesting, and I'm sorry I got rid of your Cabbage Patch baby. I apologize and ask your forgiveness publicly. Moms and dads make mistakes, and sometimes ego, it's hard to admit those mistakes, and it's hard to admit that you messed up, especially with your children. You want to believe, of course you want to believe that everything you're doing is for the best of your children. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes our motives really are in question. Sometimes what we're doing is for the best of us instead of what's best for our children. That totally happens. And we're probably all guilty of it.
Every parent does the best they can with the information they have, with the raising they had. And every parent is human, last I checked. So they make mistakes. They mess up. And not all parents end up being willing to admit that. Some parents have their own mental health struggles that they have not worked through, and their own personality disorders that they have not checked. And, I know there's a lot of people coming out of the homeschooling and Christian communities and stuff that have a lot of hurt from those parents who refuse to change and heal. And
if you're not letting your children come back for the holidays because they have a Cabbage Patch baby,
that's a you problem.
That's usually there's more to it than that. Usually there's more to it than that.
It's one of those things that, I talked to a lot of young people who have come out of the homeschooling community and the Christian community, especially like the conservative Christian community. and they have so much anger and stuff. And it's one of those things that once you start maturing to a point, you understand that they didn't do it perfectly. And soon as you recognize that they're human, they have their flaws, you're going to be a lot better off. It doesn't mean that you have to accept everything they did to you.
Oh, no,
or
no, no, no,
everything
no.
they would do in the future.
Well,
there's some people that you need. I've encouraged young people to cut ties with.
yeah. I mean,
Sometimes,
whenever those things go around the internet of if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be? Mine is to walk away from your family and never look back.
right.
I wish I had done that. I tried restitution in a place that it was unhealthy for any of us for me to be trying restitution. Did God turn some of that to good? Yes. He turns things to good for all those who love him. But we need to remember that if you have a rebellion, if you're rebellious in any way, then you've got to get rid of that first. You have to get rid of your own rebellion first.
Your attitude and your behavior is speaking about you and your internal work,
and it's
not
feeds
about
off of their toxic traits. So if you've got toxic traits, you feed off of the toxic traits and you bounce those off of each other, and it's a reactive thing. So you don't have anybody actually acting in love the way that we're supposed to.
You don't have anybody actually stopping the cycle.
Yeah.
You're just becoming another cog in the wheel of the cycle continuing on.
Yes. Yep. And so you have to identify those things that made, the generations before you toxic, and you have to stop that within yourself first. Mm-hmm. And then once you've dealt with that, which is a constant process, you don't just deal with it once and it's over with. I will be dealing with my brokenness forever. Until the Lord calls me home and gives me my glorified,
gives us complete healing.
Yes.
Yep.
And he makes all things new. Then, and I look forward to that time because I am very broken. But, it helps. And that's what we've got to do. And I remember my mother saying to me after she moved up here, I remember her saying to me one time, "It's not all about you, Dawnita." And I just looked at her and I think God gave me this, but I'm the only one I can change. Therefore, whenever I'm analyzing the situation, and I'm an INTJ, so I'm going to analyze everything to death. When I'm analyzing the situation and trying to figure out how to change the circumstances, I'm the only one that I can change. And I have to keep that in mind. And it really gave her a different perspective as well of what I was doing, because she always saw me as selfish when actually I was trying to break out of the cycle, and that's not selfish, that's healthy, and I think she realized that later, but it takes a while.
It takes a while. And the thing is that you can't convince them. It's not your job to convince them. It's your job to work on yourself.
Yeah.
And it's your job to forgive them and start moving on with your healing.
Yeah.
And, I've seen a lot of young people coming out of this, out of these generations and being angry at God and the church and their parents and, and some of it's very legitimate. There was a lot of abuse that happened. And then there's others of it that's like, honey, that's ridiculous to be mad at your parents and be cutting them off because they threw away your Cabbage Patch doll. That's
and this is just one example. There can be things a lot worse than that. But, to a child, those are the most important things in their lives at that point,
Right.
And I usually tried to be very considerate, but there are a few toys I got rid of because you get too many toys. You just get
Right.
too many toys. So you can't keep them all. And
Right.
there are a few, I know, each one of you regret me getting rid of something.
Right. Well,
You
and
know?
it's just, again, like I've said, there's no perfect parent.
Yeah.
Every parent has messed up and hurt their child in some way. Every child is damaged because guess what? We're human. We've all descended from Adam and Eve and Noah and his wife. They were hurt people that hurt people that hurt people.
Yeah.
So,
And we're in a broken world that even hurts us beyond that.
exactly.
And a lot of times pain that we get and trauma that we get, that we receive ourselves, we project the cause of that trauma onto a particular person. And we've seen that many times where somebody has projected their trauma onto somebody specific who really may have had very little, if anything, to do with it.
Yep.
And, you know, we need to be careful of that as well.
Right. Yep. I see that a lot with my bonus kids. And unfortunately, the unfortunate, sad reality is that I have to pay for a lot of the consequences of their mother's actions. And their dad especially gets the brunt of that.
Right.
And because the thing is that they know in the back of their mind that their dad is going to love them unconditionally, whereas there's not that unconditional love guaranteed from their mother. It is a conditional love. So it is safer to hate on dad, to project the hurts that they've gotten from their mother onto their dad, and to build this alter reality that is not true. They're living in a lie.
Yeah.
And they get so confused whenever that gets shaken and they're faced with truth. And then that makes them upset because they're in survival mode.
Right.
And we have to deal with that, even though we didn't bring that on ourselves.
Right.
You know, we didn't ask for that, but we're having to deal with the consequences of that. And then we're having to watch those poor kids and just pray that someday, when they're more mentally, physically mature, that they will start breaking out of that cycle, realizing what's going on, and start their own healing.
Right.
Sad thing is, there's not a lot of kids that actually do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but that's where, you know, there is power in prayer. So
yeah. And when you do break out of it, and I can say this from personal experience, when you break out of the cycle, and when you break away from that, then take that personally. Because, like you said, everybody's got trauma. Everybody does. So even the children that were raised in the best of homes, you know, but went off and did drugs, or ended up in a bad marriage and ended up divorced, or this or that, those parents turned around and looked at me, who shouldn't have had any kind of a life.
Who shouldn't have turned out okay.
Shouldn't have turned out okay at all. They look at me and they're like, my children were supposed to turn out good. You have no right to have a good life.
Right.
You know, and I know they don't mean that. I don't think most of them even realize that's what's going on, you know. But me being analytic that analyzes everything, I see it for what it is, you know.
Mm-hmm. And it is some unresolved trauma on their end too. Something that was planted a long time ago, and
sometimes that's from the church. Because, you know, raise up a child the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And they're like, I took them to church. I did this with them. I did that with them. And they turned away from God. And it's like,
no, you had some false teachers. You had some false
handing that responsibility over for, God never said, raise the child in the church the way they should go and they will not depart from it. No, that's not what he said. He said, raise them in the way that they should go. That's constant nurturing in relationship. And when you're turning the responsibilities over to the Sunday school teacher, the children's church teacher, the teacher at school, you know, I'm not hating on
grain
public
of
school.
Rice. And the amount of time they get to spend with your child.
Yeah, you've got very little time that you're spending with your children, you know, and I'm not hating on that at all. It's the time that you spend with your children needs to be relationship building time. I'm not talking quality time over quantity, though quantity time makes a lot more difference than what people think it does.
Again, if your daughters are getting their self-image from Barbie, which is a load of horse hockey, then they really weren't getting that from Barbie. That just means that they weren't getting what they needed from
they weren't getting it from something else. Yeah, or if they're getting their self-image from peers whose parents can afford the nice clothes and whose parents can afford to take them to the beauty shop for pretty hairdos, and whose parents, you know.
And again, I have watched kids, and myself included, that didn't care about the name brand stuff. And, you know, whenever you turn into a teenager, there's a little bit of that because you're wanting to fit in, you're wanting to be cool. But then I was raised in such a way that you hold your head up, you be proud with who you are, what you look like. You do your best to look your nicest. And you present.
I'm so glad that we got that by, because I do not have that at all.
And it's just, you present yourself how you want to be, you know, seen.
If you want to be treated with dignity, you have to act with dignity.
Exactly.
If you want to be treated with respect, you need to act with respect.
I never had an issue with the kids who had more toys than me or had better clothes than me. And whenever I did in my teen years experiment with that, getting the name brand it clothes, I quickly figured out, because I had been taught a practical lifestyle and mindset, that they weren't practical. And so I very quickly, you know, I'm a teen, I'm experimenting, I'm learning. And I learned, I was like, this name brand stuff is a bunch of hogwash. That's ridiculous. And so again, because my mom and dad had spent that time every day just instilling that, and maybe not even, I can't like think of a conversation we ever had about that stuff, but
there were just conversations. The movies, the TV shows that we watched, when we went to Walmart or something, it was a constant conversation. We were always talking about those things. We were talking about the clothing. Is this appropriate? Is this not appropriate? Does that look comfortable? Does, you know, would you be able to do chores in this? You know,
and then there was also just the mindset. You know, my parents weren't sitting there going, "Oh, I'm such a victim. I'm sorry, I can't afford you name brand clothes." What kind of attitude would that have given me?
Right.
I would have grown up going, I'm such a victim. I couldn't afford to wear the name brand clothes like all the other girls, you know. And unfortunately, a lot of my generation, the millennials, were raised with that attitude.
Oh, yeah.
Very entitled.
Because those of us of the Gen X, you know, I mean, there was a big difference between the clothes that I wore and the clothes that the popular kids wore. And I was taught that I was the ugliest girl in school, because I didn't have the pretty hairdo or the, you know, I had the little page boy short haircut and was in hand-me-downs. But I looked forward to my cousin's hand-me-downs. It's like whenever I would see her picture in the yearbook, you know, her school picture, I'm like, oh, I can't wait until I get that top that she was wearing or whatever. So
it's a mindset, and your kids pick up on that mindset, and being conscious too, being self-aware. Most people are not self-aware. I think I saw a statistic
that just
the other day
blows my mind.
I know. I saw this crazy statistic that like 80 85% of people are not self-aware. And then here is the kicker: 95% of people think they're self-aware. So I'm like, that's that's kind of scary.
It
is. Being self-aware means that you are conscious of the choices that you are making, the behaviors that you're doing every day, the habits that you're setting. You are conscious of all of that. Like, I mean, even
when somebody gives you a suggestion and says, hey, maybe you should think before you talk, you're taking that into retrospect rather than getting defensive about it.
Yeah. And if you do get defensive, you catch yourself and go, why did that upset me so much? And you're asking yourself that rather than, well, that blinkety blink blink, I can't believe they would say that to me. Instead of reacting, you're always analyzing, I guess, and not over analyzing, but you're aware and you're going, why did I react this way? Why don't I like this instead of that? Why do I prefer
you're
this?
You're considering the situation. You're thinking through it. Yeah. Critical thinking rather than just reacting to everything that happens to you in your life. Yeah.
And I think that self-awareness, and then teaching your kids that self-awareness at an early age by asking them open-ended questions, even at like 3 years old, and getting them to think about things to where they start paying attention to, you know, I've watched my 3-year-old start paying attention to, why do I do this instead of this? Or why did I just do that? And she's starting to become self-aware at 3 years old, and starting to look at how she does things and try different things already, you know, and part of that is the stage of development she's in. It's a perfect stage to start teaching them self-awareness.
Yes.
And then also it's just that, you know, my husband and I are actively daily practicing that in ourselves and with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's where just a lot of parents tend to fail. You're not going to be a perfect parent. You're not going to, you know, raise kids that aren't hurt in some way. They're human. You're human. But the thing is, raising them, teaching them how to be self-aware, how to have healthy boundaries, how to know themselves, and how to repair after damage.
Well, and we need to remember our goal too isn't to be the best parents. Our goal should not be based on ourselves. Our goal is to make our children be better parents than what we've been.
And our goal is to teach our children how to hopefully have a better relationship, or their own unique relationship with Christ, so that we can guarantee they will be in the place of ultimate healing with us at the end of time.
Exactly.
That's the thing, is that we're not going to have unhurt kids. We're not going to heal fully while we're here. They're not going to heal fully. But we want to teach them that the one thing that they can depend on, that is unshakable, that will never let them down, and that will ultimately heal them, they can count on that.
Yeah.
No matter what I do, I want my daughter to know that she can count on Jesus Christ to be there for her, no matter what happens.
Yep. The only perfect one.
The only perfect one that is going to help her become perfect in the end. Help her and I.
Yep. Because I think we have hashed out the world right now. This has been over 30 minutes. So anyway.
I happen to think, really quick, back on the baby boom turn of the century. I did a quick Google on when did we start keeping records of children being born and stuff. And it was right then.
Yeah.
At that time period. So we had very little to no record keeping.
Before that.
And then it is right there. Like, people started record keeping a little before, but Congress did, the Bureau of Census established that in 1902. So, and people about 10 years before that, knew it was coming and started keeping better records.
Yeah. And we need to remember too, in the 1890s, nearly every city in the world had a huge fire that supposedly burned tons of records before that. So when they're giving you a chart that looks like this, they're making that up. Scientists make a lot of assumptions. I am going to be talking about that in my YouTube video on Thursday. If you've made it this far in the video and you're interested, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I'll be on There's No Place Like Home YouTube channel on, I don't know, I don't know when she'll post that, but it'll be sometime this week as well. And we will be going more in depth in some of this stuff from a biblical perspective. So it'll be a lot of fun. But anyway, well, thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit this morning. And we will see y'all later. And remember, you can make it through the dust storms of life with God's divine help.